Life has a humorous way of making things complete, or so they say. But as I sat on the leather couch in Tom's immaculate modern house, sipping water and feigning indifference to the mocking laughter around me, I found nothing amusing about it. Tom, Sophia's new husband, was in his element, surrounded by his carefully chosen entourage, a circle of elitists basking in their own glory. And then there was me, the uninvited guest, the ex-husband who, at least in their eyes, was still struggling to put his life back together. I had initially believed Sophia had invited me out of goodwill, but it soon became clear that this was something else entirely. This was her moment of fulfillment, the final nail in the coffin of our past. Tom wanted to mark his territory, to showcase his victory by replacing me with a more prosperous, superior version of myself. So I played along. I let them place me in the most inconvenient part of the room, pretending as though I didn't belong there. They made fun of me, picked at my supposed shortcomings, and laughed about my lack of accomplishments. What they failed to realize was that I owned them. Not in the way they own their expensive cars or luxury timepieces, but in the way a spider owns the fly caught in its web. Calmly, quietly, completely. They were too absorbed in their own sense of superiority to notice that I had barely taken a sip of my drink before Tom seized the moment, turning the conversation toward me. Smiling smugly, his flawless face radiating arrogance, he asked, "Daniel, tell us, what do you do these days?" His voice dripped with phony interest, as if I were some charity case. Sophia was the first to laugh, that same chuckle I had heard 1,000 times before. She swirled her wine, pretending to puzzle it out as though she had no idea. The room erupted in laughter. Greg, one of Tom's business associates, leaned forward, amusement barely concealed behind his glass. "Still unemployed? That's tough, man. I don't know how you do it. If I didn't have an excuse to wake up in the morning, I'd lose my mind." Angela, Greg's wife, snorted. "Sophia, you're too kind," she said, taking a sip of her drink. "If it were me, I'd be ashamed to have an ex still hanging around without a job." I mustered a feeble smile. Not out of embarrassment, not because their words held any sting, but because I was silently memorizing every insult, every sneer. My chest grew warm, my fingers itched to end the game right then and there, to watch their faces shift from ridicule to sheer terror. Tom, oblivious, leaned back on the couch, stretching lazily. "I keep telling Sophia," he groaned loudly. "She really dodged a bullet." The room erupted in cruel laughter. I clenched my jaw, my grip tightening around my glass. But Tom wasn't finished. He was savoring the moment. "I don't mean to offend, Daniel," he continued, flashing that same smug grin. "But it must be difficult to watch her move on with someone who can truly take care of her." Greg chuckled. Sophia smirked into her wine glass. "That's cold, Tom," Angela giggled, nudging Sophia playfully. "If it were me, I'd have blocked my ex ages ago." Sophia just smiled, as if she were too generous to be resentful, as if she were offering me some kind of grace. They all chuckled, reveling in their little spectacle, convinced of their victory over me. What they didn't know, what none of them had the slightest inkling of, was that I owned them. Not just metaphorically, not just in a way that would wound their pride. I owned their jobs, their careers, their futures. Every single one of them was sitting comfortably in that mansion because of me. Greg had a job because I gave him one. Angela got her promotion because I approved it. Every move they thought they had earned, every inch of power they believed was theirs, I had orchestrated it all. And yet they were laughing at me. The final blow came when Tom lifted his drink and smiled at me, as if he had just given a standing ovation to the world's biggest failure. "To Sophia," he toasted, "for finally getting the man she deserves." They clinked glasses, smirking, lost in their illusion. I lifted my own glass just slightly, nodding in silent agreement. Let them have their laughs. In less than 12 hours, there wouldn't be anything left for them to laugh about. They thought I was a failure. The ex-husband who couldn't keep a job. The man Sophia had been wise enough to leave behind. They had no idea. They thought they were powerful, that their little group of elitists, with their financial clout and business acumen, made them untouchable. But the truth? They were pawns on my chessboard. For years, I had quietly arranged every promotion, every job title, every company acquisition. I had built an empire from the shadows, pulling the strings while they believed they were winning. I had been patient. I had played the long game, and tomorrow it would all come crashing down. Melissa, the loudest of them all, would walk into her office and find herself locked out. A financial audit would reveal her illegal expenses. Angela would receive a termination notice for her poor management and ethical violations. Greg and Scott would be called into a meeting regarding their falsified sales data and insider trading. And Tom would get a call from his board of directors informing him that, by the end of the day, his financial support had been withdrawn. His company, his entire empire, was on the verge of collapse. And Sophia? Well, Sophia would simply watch as the life she thought she had secured crumbled beneath her. Everything she had built would come undone. At 8:45 a.m., I took another sip of my coffee, just another Monday morning. They had no idea. By 9 a.m., their world would be over, and I would be there to watch it all burn. The name of the accounting woman, Emma, was whispered to her colleague as she informed them that there was a problem with Melissa. One of the IT staff muttered to himself that Angela was finally being fired. As we arrived at the main entrance, Tom abruptly stopped moving and turned to face me, his fists clenched. I arched an eyebrow. "You set this up," he hissed in a low, angry voice. "This isn't over," Melissa snapped as she whirled around, pointing a manicured finger at me. I grinned, slipping my hands into my pockets. "Melissa, you didn't realize that everything you owned was originally mine." Angela shook her head in shock, then let out a bitter laugh. "Breaking you. We allowed it to happen while we were laughing at you during those dinner parties. Would you have trusted me if I had told you the truth?" In silence, I shrugged. They were all too blinded by their own conceit to see the answer, which was no. Too inebriated by their delusion of dominance to ever entertain the idea that Tom was the owner of the man they despised. Tom's eyes burned with rage. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," he said, stepping closer, his mouth tense. "I have contacts with investors. You can't just destroy us and get away with it." I tilted my head. "Who do you mean?" I asked, abruptly cutting him off. "The investors who recently pulled out of your business this morning? Or the legal team that just learned your financial documents were marked for fraud?" His expression darkened, but I wasn't done yet. I took a composed step forward. "Are you talking about Sophia?" I asked, lowering my voice. He stiffened, his eyes flashing with something unreadable. "She will adore telling you why she left the man who built everything she ever desired, only to get his whole body tattooed in regret." He had no response. He realized I was right. Security unlocked the doors. As they swung open, Tom gave me one final glare, his face contorted in resentment. "This isn't over," he repeated, venom dripping from his voice. I grinned. "Yes, it is." And then they were gone. As soon as the doors closed, hushed whispers filled the room. My right-hand executive, Sarah, approached me with her tablet in hand. "It was dramatic," she remarked, looking at the door. I grinned. They were expecting it. She nodded, reviewing her notes. "Legal has completed their terminations. Their offices have been emptied. Their access and security erased. Melissa tried to contact a few workers, but Greg's company numbers were disabled. Scott attempted to reach out to rivals, but..." She touched her screen. "Non-compete agreements make that impossible." I nodded. They weren't merely unemployed. They had no power. "After today, businesses will contact them," she continued. "But they're blacklisted due to the financial and legal documents we have in our arsenal." Tom was going to enter a nightmare when he got home. By 11:30 a.m., Sophia had most likely heard the news. I glanced toward the office, knowing she would be calling soon. For years, I had allowed them to think I was merely Sophia's disgraced ex-husband. Today, they recognized me for who I truly was. I turned to the staff. "For those of you who were curious," I began in a calm yet assertive tone, "Summit Innovations isn't going anywhere. Today marks the start of a new era." The room was silent. "You have all worked hard under leadership that prioritized relationships over skill, manipulation over merit. That ends today." People looked at each other, some nodding, others still in shock. I could feel their relief. Greg, Melissa, Angela, and Scott had crushed innovation, suppressed talent, and used their positions to strangle progress. Their empire was in ruins. I took a deep breath. I built this company from the ground up, and going forward, I'm going to run it the way it was always meant to be. A moment of silence passed. Then genuine applause. Neither forced nor polite, but real. I nodded once, then turned back to Sarah. "Send an email to the entire organization. Everyone needs to know the restructuring starts today." She smiled. For the first time in years, I stood at the doors where Tom and his so-called empire had crumbled in shame. I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in a long time. The past was finally behind me. It took longer than anticipated, but I had control over the future. By 1:30 p.m., my phone rang. Sophia. I let it ring twice before picking up. A moment of silence passed before her voice arrived, clipped and furious. What the hell did you do? Leaning back in my chair, I gazed out at the skyline. I guess you've heard the news, I said smoothly. Tom just arrived, she spat. Melissa is furious that you fired him and half of his executive team. Angela contacted me in tears, threatening lawsuits. What did you do? I grinned, imagining Tom pacing angrily in her house, Melissa spinning in a panic, Angela frantically looking for a way out. She let out a sharp breath, trying to control her anger.